Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jeremy Newman. I'm the Policy Director with the Texas Homeschool Coalition. We are the largest statewide advocacy organization for homeschooling and parental rights in Texas. And I'm giving you guys a handout that outlines some of our concerns with the bill. I have not seen the committee substitute at this point, so I don't know if any of these are directly addressed. but
do you want to be shown against the bill?
Yes. Yes, at this point. As it's currently worded, DFPS is making regular monthly visits to the home of anyone that they believe to be at risk. If we're talking about only family-based safety services, in theory, that means that all of these services are opt-out by the or opt-in or opt-out by the family at their own discretion. But even assuming that that's the case, you're still telling what the language of the bill indicates to me to be a CPS caseworker, potentially, to go regularly to the home of someone who they are now predisposed to believe is at fault because of either some at-risk factor, which potentially can be nothing other than their income level, which is specifically mentioned in the bill. And it kind of brings up the image of a minority report, almost, that these families are now being told to DFPS that they're at risk, and the inevitable consequence of that is that DFPS caseworkers will be predisposed to believe that these families have done something wrong. And you will also inevitably end up in situations where DFPS is making investigations of these families based on things that would not normally have been investigation worthy. If you look on the handout that I mentioned, this has some pretty significant Fourth Amendment implications, and that is specifically under the Gates case, which was 2008, and the Garcia case, 2009. When you send CPS to this home, what inevitably happens is that the parent at the door does not have the understanding to tell CPS whether or not they can or cannot enter the home, because from their perspective, the government is here at their door. And so a lot of families don't understand that they should or should not waive their Fourth Amendment rights. And so what ends up happening is that CPS comes into the home, and under the Gates case in particular, the court acknowledged, they said, it is well established that defendant's mere acquiescence to a show of lawful authority is insufficient to establish voluntary consent, and silence or passivity cannot be the basis for consent to enter. But that is exactly what will happen in a lot of these situations. And once the FPS is in the home, as happened in the Garcia case, issues that normally would not have been a justification for removing the kids will become a justification in the caseworker's eyes, because you've already told them that this family is at risk of abuse or neglect. Under the language of the bill, you're sending DFPS to the home of anybody who they believe to be at risk.
Right. And that person has a right to say, I don't want you in my house.
Yes. And
that person has a right to say, I don't want you talking to my kids.
That's correct. And that's the whole point of the second section that I talked about related to the Fourth Amendment. This already happens when CPS comes to your door and they have an accusation that you're abusive or neglectful. It already happens. Now CPS comes to the door and they think that you're at risk, and so from our perspective, there's no reason it can't happen in that situation. In fact, you're encouraging it to happen.
That's fine, but that doesn't change any of your constitutional protection.
So your point to me is that the Fourth Amendment protects a person who chooses not to consent to someone coming to your door. My point to you is that the average person doesn't know that they can refuse that, or doesn't understand the implications of failure to refuse that.
And again, my question is saying, just as we talk about officers asking to search people's cars, just as we talk about officers asking to search people's homes, just as we talk about when officers just stop you and say, hey, can I talk to you? Isn't the prerogative for the person to understand what their own constitutional rights are on the person?
Yes, it is, but you can't presume that the department is then able to set up processes that would easily bypass the person's understanding of what their rights are. I mean, what you're telling me is that provided the person understands the implications of their rights, they're protected. Most people don't understand the implications of their rights. I mean,
so you're basically saying is you want a special carve-out in the Constitution of the United States and Constitution of the State of Texas for this instance?
No. I mean, please define the carve-out that I've asked for.
That we're going to enforce constitutional protections differently because of the situation.
What is the difference in the constitutional protections that I've asked for?
Well, if an officer pulled you over, an officer stopped at your door, the officer would just be able to ask you, hey, can I come in? Can I come talk to you? And if you said yes, then it just happened.
Sure.
This one, you would basically say, well, this situation, we're only going to come talk to you if you understood.
No, I mean, the government always has the ability to come to your door. I mean, what you're telling me is that there's no reason we couldn't send a police officer to all these people's doors anytime we wanted to, because they have the ability to refuse an investigation. That's true, but it's not a justification for sending a police officer to their door anytime you want to.
Right, that's true.
We can always send police officers to any door we want to all the time. Sometimes people.
But we wouldn't advocate for that policy.
I'm waiting for a break.
All right.
Mr. Wu, tell us, are you done?
I'm done.
Mr. Frank?
Is a concern, and I think I personally think it's a very legitimate concern, because I think most people don't, I mean, the reality is most people aren't lawyers, and the poorer you are on the economic scale, the less likely you are to understand your rights. So I very much appreciate that your concerns that you're bringing. Is the concerns that we are targeting people, for investigation? Is that your concern?
That is what we see it resulting in.
Okay, because I do think that's something that needs to be made very clear, because I personally am very concerned about adding any new people, giving a reason to go into a home, because as soon as you give a reason to go into a home, then if it is a catch-22. If you decline to come in, and we have this in the Homeschool Coalition a lot, if you decline to have them come in, then they assume you're guilty, and all of a sudden now you've got a judge involved, and all of that stuff happens. If this is providing additional services to people that are already in it, but we need to make sure that's very clear. If it's not clear, we just need to make sure it's very, very clear that, yeah, in my opinion.